You have 14,000, he has about 13 in round figures, with 181 out of 382 polls. It looks like you're going to be deputy mayor again.
You know, I just refuse to accept the fact that neighborhood planning, diversifying the economy, stop signs, traffic, snow removal is left or right. It's services, and that's what we want to deliver to the citizens of Ottawa.
You must be very happy.
Yes, I am, Brooke. It's really good to know that the citizens do understand what you were trying to do and they have confidence in you.
We knew what Ottawa was going to be, and we knew it was going to be a human city and a good city. And you're the ones that did that. So thank you so much. Thank you for being yourselves.
We have a social responsibility to ensure that the interests of cultural minorities and the disadvantaged are not sacrificed to short-sighted budgetary decisions. Services which are vital to the health of our community are not negotiable. I chose municipal politics more by accident than by plan, and that was because at the time when I ran for municipal politics, as I've said, it was just, it was something that was happening and I was going to give it a try. I really didn't think I was going to get elected that first time round. But after the election, I resigned, of course, from the health unit, and I threw myself into council, and I found a whole level of government that I absolutely fell in love with and realized the way that people can respond and the grassroots people can respond to are there. The ability to help groups connect with each other is very much the municipal level, and I guess that's, we had a love affair in municipal government myself. Ambitions to be a political leader, I guess not. Probably it's been the farthest thing from my mind when I was growing up. I did have a strong ambition to get into science and math, and didn't follow that through, I guess because I didn't have enough determination, and went into nursing. Got married, 23 years old. Very traditional, very much doing what was expected of me, and politics was the last thing from my mind. I was at home, suburban housewife, changing diapers, had a family. Driving children to school, ballet, hockey, football, whatever. And cooking meals and supposedly keeping a tidy house. And one day, just when our youngest child was getting ready to start school in the fall, and Ken came home one night and I said, you know, I'm kind of thinking about going back to university. And I thought, well, he'll really take off with that. And he says, I think that's the best thing you've said in a long time, why don't you? And it was just that kind of encouragement that I went ahead and made applications and so forth, and I went to Ottawa University and took my public health and then finished my degree later and worked for the health unit. And getting back into the community from where I had left it, because 15 years ago it was a very different community in public health too, to what I came back to. Being a public health nurse is looking at a community and trying to define what their needs are and looking at it from a prevention point of view. And as mayor, all you have is a broader district. And of course what you're doing is you're looking at your community, you're looking at what is best for the health of that community and how you set priorities so that you're approaching it in a preventative way. So I don't see it much different. From the
Professional Secretaries International expressing their support of the Office of Equal Opportunity for Women. Received? APNP?
Yeah.
All right.
Item 3, page 26, condominium application for construction of 31-unit townhouse project to be located at 26 Montcalm Street. Alderman Nancy Smith.
I don't want to delay the project. I wonder if council would consider deferring it until after the break, and at that point, perhaps after some discussions with our staff, I can propose whether or not we need to defer it further, if that's acceptable, Your Worship.
It's my whole fear
Have we got a
that
seconder?
none of us know all of the details of this. If it's worded in that way, I'm fine. I'd be happy to have them examine that aspect.
Well, Alderman, I gave them the full results of the interviews, and we'll go in camera if you want to discuss them. I'm quite happy to do that. I don't see any point in it going back to committee and going through the same thing again. Do you want to go in camera?
Fair? Yes, please.
Okay. Motion to refer is debatable. But
If we're going to debate
I
it here, and
just
that's
wanna-
the
yeah.
sense of council, I would ask that we at least do it later in the evening.
Yeah, Your Worship, I'll move that we defer the item to later in the
Okay.
agenda.
Don't want to put Alderman Howard Smith out of the chamber, and I'm about to.
Good. Carried.
Energy Action Plan Process Phase 1. How does council feel about it? Nobody wants it, okay? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Matheson, but no thanks. I would like to now make a suggestion. As you know, there's the community open house for the Congress Centre, and if we would adjourn now and be back at 6:30, we will continue the council. And anybody that doesn't want to go over to the Congress Centre, there is supper in the cafeteria. The cafeteria is open on the 8th floor.
Did you want to walk through first, or do we want to?
I wouldn't mind, but I have to be back at council at 6:30 though.
All right,
so
we're
that's-
scheduled for Amy to give his speech at 6. We can put it back a few minutes.
Hi, Jen Primrose.
Nice to meet you. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
Is your all your own work, Jen?
Yes.
You're from Ottawa?
No,
You're from
Attelston. It's near, it's in Quebec.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, welcome.
Thank
And
you
I
very
hope
much.
this will be good for you.
It is your own
Yes.
day, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why they're so good.
Yeah.
You see, there's a tremendous expression. You can watch and you see, you just might be able to. And when you go in the deep, deep snow, you won't go down. You'll be able to watch. Oh, isn't that beautiful, seeing that craft here?
Do you ever feel guilty about dividing your time like that, or did you?
Guilty. I think that I have felt guilty so often, and I still do. I think I'm dealing with it better now. I think you get to the point where you have to learn to deal with your guilt and to put it up front and talk about it. And I think I've had to talk about it both to the children and to Ken. And we've done that. And no matter how much reassurance you get, you still think, well, you know, if I was really a good mother or a good politician, I'd be able to do both equally well. And it took me a while to realize that I shouldn't have every piece of ironing done and folded in the drawers and dinner on the table and so forth.
She's really Well, we'll eat first, Mom, and then you can eat after.
It's good. Let us come and sit down.
Good part about coming
And I'm really quite amazed at myself that I don't even do grocery shopping anymore. I think, well, they've all been taught to eat and they all know how to cook, and eventually we will get food on the table, and none of us have died of malnutrition.
The 20.
The Thursday,
Right after Bob.
29th. They're packing the 29th.
Are they taking the
and
stuff
having
like
it
this?
Open over the table there, right?
I'm gonna put her small over here, Liz.
Pass the babies. Is she going to, do you think she'll stay down there?
People talk about how difficult it is to deal with issues you're not sure of, big construction sites, or you're dealing with hard services that maybe it's not something you've had a background in. But probably the most difficult thing for me was the idea that maybe I am neglecting my children, because I think, honestly, there was one thing I had in my life as a goal, was to be a good wife and to be a good mother. And you know, the messages you get is that if mother isn't being all attentive, therefore she's lesser than what she should be. And I think I do realize more than ever now that we're going to probably get that message from society for a long time. And I think it's so important that women support each other. I've had friends that have sent in a casserole during campaigns particularly, or have said, well, I'll look after the children, or I'll go over to the house, other women. And it's so important that we do that for each other, because I think only another woman can understand the depth of feeling of that guilt and how really we do want to do what's right.
As our news cameras recorded the litany of accomplishments of Marion Dewar's 7 years in the mayor's office, the face of our city shows very well how much has been done in that time.
She never lost sight of what was best for the city. She loved it inordinately, and she never lost sight of what was good for it. And to me, that's what makes a good mayor. I don't know that people really realize what a tough negotiator she is. And to me, one of her biggest accomplishments is the Rideau Centre.
The Rideau Centre literally changed the face of downtown Ottawa, but it took almost a decade to hammer the deal through. Much of that hammering was done by Marion Dewar. It was probably the most difficult test of her skills as a conciliator and a tough negotiator.
Marion's done well. I remember one time, and I won't name names because it isn't fair, but she was negotiating with another public sector body, and there was $1 million in the line, and it was interesting. She won.
There might be a few chauvinists left out there that think a woman can't do it, but I think they're in the minority these days.
I think she's delightful. She's been a friend of our families and mine for many years.
And her achievements?
Her only problem is with her politics as an NDPer. Otherwise, she's perfect.
The moment that plane arrived early in an August morning and the Vietnamese refugees came off it, the look in their eyes of just almost dazed, but a sense of hope, I thought maybe it's all worthwhile. Maybe this is what this job is all about.
It was called Project 4000, an ambitious but politically risky undertaking for Marion Dewar. Bringing 4,000 Vietnamese refugees to one city stirred an awful lot of emotion, anger, even hatred. But it became a model for other Canadian cities to help those who had come to be known as the boat people.
Surely everybody in this room can look around and see themselves and recognize that we were all once immigrants.
I discovered to my dismay that Canada had a quota of 8,000, and that was in June. And they told me, and the civil servants told me, that we had progressed very well, and they had got 4,000 people processed, and we were right on line, and by the end of the year we'd have our 8,000. So it seemed to me that it was a much bigger problem than that, and here we're living in a country with lots of space and so on. So I said, well, that's fine, we will take 4,000 in the city of Ottawa, and then you'll have nothing to do the rest of the year, so what will you do about it? And they were a little aghast and said, well, they weren't sure, and they hadn't thought about that. But I was very serious. So I got together with some people in the community, and we had a public meeting and talked about whether Ottawa could take 4,000 refugees, and we thought it was quite easy to do. 300,000 people in the greater Ottawa, so surely we could absorb 4,000. There was a great response at a public meeting, and the community just were beautiful, the way they all came out and said yes, they wanted to do something, and they signed up and they formed committees and they worked together in groups, decided that they would sponsor families, and there's been some beautiful stories from it. But more important than that was, at the end of that week, I said, if we're going to take 4,000, what's going to happen to the other communities? Let's have a press conference just before July the 1st. What a great way to celebrate Canada Day. And we'll challenge other communities to see if they will also take some refugees. Well, it was really funny because I did. I said, Ottawa's taking 4,000. What's going to happen to the other mayors? And of course, immediately it was picked up by the media. The other mayors were all asked. I got calls from all over the country. And one of the funniest ones was the mayor of Calgary at the time was Ross Alger, and he phoned me and he said, Marion, what on earth are you doing back there? And I said, nothing, Ross. All we're doing is helping to bring in 4,000 refugees, because you know what the Vietnam situation is. These people need homes. And he said, 4,000? Calgary's bigger and better. We can take 8,000. The very interesting thing was that the people of Calgary responded. People all over this country responded at the grassroots in their communities, and they worked together and they brought people in. A month after our meeting in the office in June, by the 21st of July, the Canadian quota was changed to 50,000. And that just says that, yes, we, the little people, can do things. We don't have to leave it to our politicians, our government. It's us, and I think it's really important that we work in those ways. I think the referendum on disarmament at the local level is something that I feel very proud of, and it was something that was initiated by Operation Dismantle, and we took it to council and we got the approval. And at that point, I wrote 4,000 letters, and I wrote to every municipality in Canada, and I asked them if they would put a referendum on their ballot. And again, we got a lot of flack from that, but to me it just made sense that we would talk at the local level about what disarmament is all about. We weren't talking about unilateral disarmament. We're talking about the ability, really, for our communities to survive. So many people, and the legal argument on it was that it wasn't a municipal issue, and we had no business delving into that kind of thing. And my response to that is, when, if and when the bombs ever drop, the first people that would be responsible and accountable are your municipalities, because we would be organizing emergency measures. However, I think emergency measures will be too late, and I think it's really important that we deal with that and stop avoiding it and recognizing we have to talk about it. We have to talk about it in our living rooms. We have to talk about it in our churches. We have to talk about it in our community centers, because I think people can really bring about disarmament. And I don't think it's going to be politicians. It's going to be the Project 4000 model. It's going to be people able to say, this is what our country wants, and we are not going to stand for anything less. Women have been the people who historically have built our society and have brought order out of chaos. It was women that started the first hospitals in Canada. It was women that started the first schools. During the Depression, it was the initiative that women showed in being able to do things that kept families together when everybody else was despairing. Women were pulling people around the table and doing things and teaching people. Some of the women were able to make something out of literally nothing, and it wasn't in violence. It was always in conciliation. It was in optimism. And I think our history is just so natural. Our history has been one of peace and constructiveness, and we have to recognize that. Sometimes we haven't always been given credit for it, but I think women have to start to recognize the things that they have done historically and take that initiative now that was given to us by our forerunners and run with it now, because it's really important, and time is important. Power, to me, is something that you have in a position of being able to share information, knowledge, so that you arrive at conclusions and decisions that make sense. And it seems to me that it's something that women do fairly well, is look at what power is all about. I think we've recognized that we need to have power. But I think in having power, what we're just saying is that we want women to be able to make decisions, informed decisions together. And that's really important. So often power is taken as something that somebody has to use to control another. And I think that's when power becomes dangerous. And maybe it's because I work within the system that I think we have to use the institutions we have and redirect them. That doesn't matter whether you're a mayor or whether you're a nurse, whether you're a doctor, whether you're working in a shelter.
It's the same kind of work we're doing up in Colvay. I mean, talking to people.
That's right. That's right.
Relating to them.
And that's my private line, so that's somebody from home. Straightened out? Yeah. Oh, poor kitty. Listen, I do have to go. There's people all the time. I'll see you shortly. Bye. I got threatened with arrest on Saturday night.
Tell us about it.
I got threatened with arrest because I went to the Housing Coalition thing because we're having a problem with housing. And I met a young girl. And she was 15 and she had been in custody of the Children's Aid and she had run away. She had had a lot of problems. She was 15 and a minor. And we've had a lot of people live in our house off and on. So I wanted to check out some of the stuff, and I phoned her social worker, and she said, how do you know all this? And I said, well, I was talking to her. Where is she? And I said, I'm not going to tell you. And she said, well, why not? And I said, because she trusts me, and I'm not going to break that trust. And we went through this whole thing. 12 o'clock, I got a call from the director of the Children's Aid saying where and how, and I have to enforce the Child Welfare Act and so forth. I said, I'm not going to tell you.
How did they find out your number in the first place?
Well, I'm listed.
Yeah.
Well, the head of the Children's Aid knows who I am because he has to come in front of me to get a budget. So then he said, well, it's going to be very embarrassing if I have to lay a charge against the chief magistrate. And I said, I guess it is. So just before we came in here, I said to the chief of police, what would you do? And I think he thinks. He smiles when they talk about his mayor. Anyway, so that. But she's still in trouble, so that was kind of sad.
Oh, dear.
But it's part of peace.
Oh, of course, yes.
And it's part of, you know, a 15-year-old girl that's on the streets and with nobody caring. It's part of peace.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And I can't, and I never could separate any of those things.
It's not their immediate threat.
I have said that just having women in power in numbers will achieve peace. And I really believe that, and I'm not for a minute suggesting that women are all going to think alike, and I don't think that we're necessarily going to be in meet utopia, but I think what we are doing is looking at a whole different parameter of decision making if we get numbers of women in power, and I think decisions will be made on a different basis, and I think that's really important because that's probably what we bring to the table more than anything else is a different perspective than what has been predominantly male. Across because it's people, and we're talking about survival of the planet, and we're talking about ourselves being able to continue to live on the planet, and that's not going to happen unless you and I get involved. So.
Okay, on the other issue with the taxi amendment, or what's going to happen this evening, are the increases slated to go ahead to be approved?
I think there's a need for social change, and I think it's important that we recognize that there is a need. And certainly the old institutions and the old methods of doing things obviously aren't working, because what's happening is the poor are getting poorer, and certainly the rich are getting into a smaller group and a more controlling group. I feel very strongly that many of the issues that we're dealing with internationally as well as nationally are just a disparity of resources, and people don't have an equal share of what's around. Certainly all you have to do is look at what's happening in our community here. The poor in our community very often are the single parent, and most often female single parent. And I think we're not going to bring about social change until we change some of the rules. I think we have to make sure that women have access to training, then they have access to positions of management, executive positions. I think as you see that change take place, then you'll start to watch a social evolution take place, because what you begin to talk about is a change of a value system. A few years ago, I would not have said that I saw myself as a role model for other women. But today, I think I would say yes, because if anybody had told me when I was in the kitchen making brownies that I was going to be a politician, let alone the mayor of Ottawa, I would have laughed you right out of the house. I think the other thing that has happened is that a lot of women have worked on my campaigns. And I don't know if I think if anybody as simple as she can make it, maybe I can too. But I like to think that now 6 women are on council instead of the one that was there in 1973. And many of them have been part of my campaign. So obviously we're doing something together and we're doing something right. And I really do think that we underestimate ourselves. You know, women are so capable of doing so many things. And if you want to call that being a role model, being an ordinary person and being able to get into politics, I guess I'm a role model. But there's a whole lot of other people that are role models too. And I don't think anybody should underestimate themselves.